Today, we're breaking down a major internal global announcement sent to Xbox employees by Matt Booty and Asha Sharma. And while it reads like a corporate strategy memo on the surface, the tone, structure, and language make it clear this is much more than that. This is Xbox openly redefining what it is, what it thinks the gaming industry is becoming, and how it believes it needs to change in order to stay relevant over the next decade. The message starts by grounding everything in Xbox's history and original identity. They frame Xbox not just as a console brand, but as an idea built around connection. From the original Xbox in 2001 to Xbox Live in 2002 to achievements, parties, and cross-device play. They emphasize that Xbox was always meant to bring players together across different experiences. They highlight that today Xbox reaches over 500 million players globally and includes some of the most recognizable franchises in gaming and entertainment. But instead of using that as a celebration point, they use it as a foundation for a much harder conversation about where things are going wrong and what is no longer working. Very quickly, the tone shifts into something far more critical and self reflective. They explicitly say players are frustrated. That line alone sets the direction of the entire message. They point to fewer console feature updates, a weaker presence on PC than they want, rising pricing pressure that makes gaming harder to access, and fragmented core systems like search, discovery, social, and personalization that still don't feel unified. They also acknowledge developers and publishers are asking for more from the platform, including better tools, better insights, and a system that actually helps games grow over time instead of just launching and fading. Then they zoom out and start talking about the industry as a whole, and this is where the message becomes less about Xbox specifically and more about a full scale analysis of where gaming is heading. They describe a generation of players whose expectations are fundamentally different from the past. These players don't just want to play games in isolation. Their attention is split across games, streaming, social media, and user generated content ecosystems. They want to create inside games, not just consume them. They want social interaction embedded into everything, and they expect constant evolution instead of static releases. From there, they highlight how the broader industry is shifting under everyone's feet. Console gaming is still large and stable, but is no longer the center of gravity it once was. Windows and PC ecosystems now represent massive player bases and intense competition. At the same time, the cost and time required to build AAA games continues to rise, forcing publishers to take fewer risks and be more selective about what gets greenlit. Meanwhile, smaller teams and independent creators are increasingly responsible for some of the biggest breakout hits in gaming, and platforms like Roblox are producing long-running, evolving experiences that rival traditional franchises in engagement and scale. They also point out the rise of subscription-based consumption models where players are no longer buying individual games as often, but instead expecting access to large, constantly updated libraries. That shift comes with its own set of expectations: instant access, continuous value, and ongoing content updates instead of one-time purchases. On top of that, they emphasize how global the industry has become, with more than half of revenue and growth now coming from outside traditional core markets. Developers in those regions are no longer just participating in the industry. They are actively competing at the highest level, often iterating faster and reinventing genres that were once considered stable. The underlying conclusion they draw from all of this is blunt. The model that got Xbox to where it is today is not the model that will carry it forward. From there, they begin laying out what Xbox is supposed to become next. They describe a shift toward Xbox being where the world plays and creates. That is a key phrase because it reframes Xbox away from being a hardware first ecosystem and toward being a platform that exists across devices, services, and creation tools. Console remains important, but it is now described as the foundation rather than the center. Cloud gaming becomes the extension of that foundation, allowing players to move across devices while maintaining their identity, progress, friends, and game libraries seamlessly. They also emphasize that Xbox needs to become more affordable, more personal, and more open. Affordable means lowering friction to entry and making it easier for players to start and stay engaged. Personal means better customization, better discovery, and a more adaptive experience that understands player preferences instead of presenting a one-size-fits-all interface. Open means expanding access to creators at every level, from solo developers to major studios, giving them tools to reach global audiences and keep their games alive and evolving over time. Then they introduce a new North Star metric, daily active players. That is important because it signals a shift away from traditional hardware sales or even subscription growth alone and toward engagement as the primary measure of success. In other words, Xbox is now defining success based on how often people actually use the ecosystem, not just how many people are technically subscribed or owning devices. The strategy is then broken down into four pillars: hardware, content, experience, and services. On hardware, the focus is stabilizing the current generation of consoles as a high-quality baseline, while also pushing forward with new performance-focused systems that bridge console and PC experiences. There is also emphasis on accessories and ecosystem expansion, suggesting a broader version of Xbox hardware as a connected ecosystem rather than a single device cycle. On content, they talk about growing and extending long-term franchises, strengthening third-party partnerships, and building a multi-year slate that is more stable and sustainable. They also explicitly mention expansion into China, emerging markets, and mobile-first audiences, which reinforces the idea that Xbox is no longer thinking only in terms of Western console markets. Live service games are also highlighted as a key pillar, along with creator-centric platforms like Minecraft, The Elder Scrolls, and Sea of Thieves, which are treated less like individual products and more like ongoing ecosystems. On experience, the focus is internal but critical. They admit the fundamentals need work. That includes discovery, social systems, customization, and personalization. They want Xbox to become the best place not just to play games, but to find games, share games, and connect with other players. They also explicitly say they want to make Xbox the best platform for developers and creators to build and grow on, which is a direct acknowledgement that current tooling and ecosystem support are not where they need to be. On services, Game Pass is reinforced but also framed as something that must evolve for sustainable economics. Cloud gaming is positioned as a major growth area, with a focus on making it feel native, fast, and reliable across TVs and low-cost devices. They also mention that acquisitions will still play a role, but only when organic growth is too slow, signaling a more disciplined approach than previous expansion strategies. One of the most notable lines in the entire message is the acknowledgement that Xbox will reevaluate exclusivity, windowing, and AI. That is a subtle but extremely important signal because it suggests that even long-standing assumptions about how Xbox distributes content and structures its ecosystem are now under review. Nothing is off the table. Then the message shifts from strategy to culture, and this is where it becomes more of an identity statement. They say very directly, "We are Xbox, not Microsoft Gaming, not a corporate structure, but a unified identity." They describe a culture built around high agency, creativity, and fast iteration. They emphasize that the goal is not to smooth over differences, but to channel them into something larger than any single studio or product. They also acknowledge that Xbox is currently a challenger, not a dominant leader, and that meeting the current moment will require pace, energy, and honest self-critique. They outline cultural principles like earning every player, protecting creative integrity, staying rebellious, prioritizing progress over perfection, focusing on clarity over ceremony, and valuing makers over managers. The message is very clear that internal transformation is just as important as external strategy. They close by thanking employees for continuing to deliver through a period of significant change over the last several years and emphasize that the next phase is about doing the most creative and courageous work of their careers together. So when you step back from all of this, what Xbox is really doing here is publicly reframing its entire identity. It is moving from a traditional platform holder built around consoles and services into something that is trying to define itself as a global cross-device, creator-driven gaming ecosystem. At the same time, it is openly admitting that parts of its current experience are fragmented, that players are not fully satisfied, and that the industry is evolving faster than traditional structures can comfortably handle. Whether this becomes a successful transformation or just another corporate vision statement depends entirely on execution. Because ideas like this sound strong on paper, but gaming is an extremely competitive, fast-moving industry where infrastructure, content, and user experience all have to align perfectly for any of it to matter in practice. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any future uploads. And if you want to support the channel directly, check out my Patreon, where my latest exclusive video is a deep dive into whether or not open world games still feel fresh in today's gaming landscape. Thanks for watching, and as always, game on.